part 2 of our wonderful new class, The Foundations of Rabbinic Mysticism, with our dear friend, Aaron Haleva. We're so excited to have you here again with us tonight for this wonderful shiur class. Just to remind you, this is a part of the brand new Sephardic Digital Academy initiative of the Sephardic Jewish Brothers of America, with all these different amazing classes, including Torah, as you can see right now, Halakha, Mysticism, Sephardic cooking and culture, Ladino language, and a whole lot more. And I encourage you all to please check out all our amazing scholars from around the country and around the world at sephardicbrotherhood.com/Sephardic Digital Academy. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our dear friend, Rabbi Aaron Haleva. Rabbi, bechavod.
Thank you very much, Ethan. So that was Ethan and his Impossible Missions Force team doing what they always do. Okay, so nochada buena a todos. We're here from New Jersey y estamos estudiando las fundaciones de la mística rabínica. I couldn't help it. I thought I'd speak a little Espanol. By the way, we always in Seattle call the spoken language Espanol, and the written language, which is really archaic, Ladino. Ladino translates the Bible, translates the Siddur, translates religious texts like the Profeta and Tisha B'Av, Noche Tisha B'Av, but the spoken language is called Espanol. Anyhow, we are here in this part 2 of a 3-part series on the foundations of Rabbinic Mysticism. And let me just tell you where we're going. We are studying as a primary text the chapter 2 from part 1 of Maimonides Guide for the Perplexed, known by its original title as Dalalet al-Ha'irin, as I explained last time. That's the Arabic. And hopefully we'll finish that tonight. And the next time we will investigate some of the Pesukim, the verses that he quotes, and you'll see how the whole picture comes together. We may read a summary of Jose Faur in his book Homo Mysticus of the exact same section that we've been studying. And I'm going to show you how the rabbis understood this event as a primary event. And they call the interaction between Adam or mankind and the snake, man receiving the slime of the snake, which poisoned, in a sense, all pagan culture. And Mount Sinai made the Israelites different in that the slime of the snake stopped. And for the rest of the world, the slime of the snake never stopped. And that snake is the one and only snake we've got here, our friend the Serpiente, who is the most culebro, which means most shrewd of all the animals of the field. So let me just review. This chapter opens up with a question that Maimonides repeats from an educated fellow. In the Arabic, it's Rijul Alumi. And that would be like, an intellectual, what we would call today an intellectual. Like you see on cable TV, the news shows, they have panels, all those talking heads, those would be Rijil Alumi. So here's his question. If man sinned by the eating of the fruit of the Es Hada'at, if man sinned by eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, how is it that he was rewarded for this? And he reached his ultimate zenith of development to know good from bad. Was that a punishment? So the question kind of telegraphs the problem if you're astute. The question assumes that intelligence means to know good from bad. We might say only someone with a conscience knows the difference between right and wrong. But is that the touchstone from a point of view of the Torah or of Judaism or of Hebrew thought? Or is there something else? Well, the question actually left out the keystone of Hebrew intelligence. The Greek philosophers asked, what is the good? But the Hebrews asked something else, which we'll see in a moment. I'm just going to give you a heads up with what was Maimonides' answer. Man had already reached his zenith prior to the sin. He had a Selem Elohim, an image of God, literally, but it means he had a character trait. He had a capacity of all the other creatures on this planet. Nobody had it, and it in some ways is comparable to how God himself operates. He has free choice and the ability to so-called program his own mind, like a computer program that can program itself. That's something special. he was given sechel in Hebrew. The sechel, which is the translation of the Arabic word al-aql, distinguishes not between good and bad, but between true and false. The imagination is concerned with good and bad. It is subjective and is thus not self-evident. Therefore, how do you know what's good and bad if you can't repeat an experiment in your lab, or you can't see with your own eyes what's good and what's bad? Somebody has to impose it on you. That's an authority. That's an Elohim. If you want to be like Elohim, you get to say what is good and bad. But because it's so subjective, it creates strife because it's always local and it's often imposed. And if someone disagrees, they get stomped. And I have a little, we'll go into this next time, but I just have a little URL about how female beauty standards have changed over the centuries. I think this one goes into from the 20s, 1920s through today. And what is beautiful is good. What is ugly is bad, but it's never been static. It's never been the same. And if you go to this URL, which I won't go now, you'll see a little bit about that. So that one, no, we're not going to go there. So now let's go to the text itself. And here we are. So can everybody see the Moreh Nebuchim? I hope. Oh,
yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. All righty. So this is the question. I already gave you the beginning of the answer, and now here we're going to go. So we'll start here. Let's see. Oh, ten da'atecha. So we would say in Ladino, metet entino, put it in your head. But Harambam says, the translation, give your understanding. V'hitbonen, and understand. Ki en hadavar kefi shehashabta be'ayun rishon. Now he's speaking to this intellectual, this Jewish intellectual, who he obviously doesn't have a great opinion of by the way he begins the answer. So he says, the matter is not as you imagined at first blush. Ella, rather, kefi sheyitbarer le'achar hitbonenut b'devarim halalu. Rather, the matter is as shall become clear after understanding or penetrating understanding in these matters. Vehu, and that is, shehasechel, the intelligence, asher hishpia Adonai la'adam, that God emanated to God, man, shehu shelemuto hasofit, and that sechel is man's ultimate completion, ultimate development. Hu asher nitan la'adam lifnei meryo. That is what was given to man before his rebellion, the violation of the first commandment, which was don't eat from the tree of Tov Vara, Da'at Tov Vara. That's referred to as a rebellion on Adam and Eve's part. So before they rebelled, they already had the zenith of their development. The alav ne'emar bo, and therefore it was said about man, shehu b'selem Elohim ubidmuto, that he had the selem, the image, and the demut is a synonym for image. That's all treated in exactly what those mean are treated in chapter 1. So it was more pithy to start here, so I didn't go into chapter 1. But about man, it was said, b'selem Elohim ubidmuto, he was created in the image and form of God. Ubighlalo dober imo, and because man was created with a image of God, with a sechel, with intelligence, that allowed God to speak to him. God doesn't speak to dogs or chimpanzees or zebras, but he could speak to man. Ubighlalo, because of that sechel, dober imo, he would speak to him, and moreover, v'nistave, man was commanded something. And it's not like just an Elohim ordering you around. It's more like if you go to martial arts and you have a sensei, he is trying to train you, but he knows very well that in order to be trained, you have to do what he says without realizing the benefit of doing it, because you can't know that benefit until you do it. So you walk in the door as a white belt and you say, I want to be a black belt like you. The only way to do that is to accept misvot, commands. Do this kata, do this kick, do this punch, stand on one foot, do 20 push-ups, all that kind of stuff. And you may not know why he's telling you to do that. And he can't explain it to you anyway because you didn't do it yet. So v'nistava, he was commanded. Kamosh ne'emar v'isav Adonai Elohim, like it says in Bereshit. God commanded Adam, and all he said was, you can eat from any of the trees in the garden, but you can't eat from this one. Because there cannot be a command to animals or to somebody who has no intelligence. And so here it is, here's the punchline. The sechel, the intelligence, is how man distinguishes Yabdil ben ha'emet ve'hasheker. This is how man distinguishes between truth and falsehood. And this capability was extant in man, in his shlemuto, completion, and like temimut, that's the shoresh taf mem mem. It's also a synonym of completion. So let me explain to you for a moment what we mean by emet vasheker. So if I tell you that if you drop a bowling ball from the top of the Empire State Building, it will gradually increase in its speed until it reaches a limit, and it will accelerate towards the ground according to G, which is the force of gravity. And the acceleration is I'll be a little fancy here, this is the second derivative of the position. So that's Newton's famous law. Force equals ma, F equals ma, force equals the mass times the acceleration. Whenever you impart a force to something, you affect its acceleration in proportion to its mass. That's true, that's emet, and you can test it. And we in high school even, and certainly in university, in physics courses, you do test it and you find out that it's true. And some people thought that a body at rest could start spontaneously moving. And that's not true. And you could test that as well. And also people thought before Louis Pasteur that there was something called spontaneous generation, that out of a piece of old meat, maggots, little worms come, just magically, they just spontaneously emerge. And that's not true. And Louis Pasteur showed that by putting the meat under a bell jar, a glass bell jar, and nothing happened, because you have to be exposed to the air where the mama maggot can deposit her little microscopic eggs, and that's where they're coming from. They're not coming from nowhere. There's no such thing as spontaneous generation. That would be...
Rabbi, sorry to interrupt. You mind if you just point out where we are on the page for some people?
Oh, right. So, right? Ki basechel yabdil ben ha'emet ve'hasheker. And I'm just explaining now as a little side point what is true and what is false. We mean scientifically true, something that you could show with a proof in a laboratory or the like. And this ability to distinguish between emet vasheker was masui bo bishlemuto utmuto, was extant in man in his final completion at the moment of creation. Aval hatob vehara, but good and bad, and in Arabic it's better language. Tob and ra is a little bit vague. Amma qabih al-abih al-hasan. So you may have heard of the name, Hasan means good, but it means like beautiful, like handsome. You may have heard of the name of Hassan, it means handsome. And qabih is onomatopoeia. It's when a dog barks at something, like he's growling, like it's ugly, he goes, like that, or some people say ik. So the way you pronounce this in spoken Arabic is beh. You don't pronounce the kof. Beh and Hassan is a nice pithy way of saying beautiful and like ugly, like gross. What is good and evil, or beautiful and ugly, or cool and nerdy, or hot and not hot, that's in conventionalisms. Loba muskalot. Not in something you know from intelligence, not the result of analysis. It's not the result of rational investigation. It's just what everybody says. Today, this is cool. Tomorrow, it could be for nerds only. Nobody would say that the heavens are curved that he uses the word kadurim, which means they look like a ball, but that they're curved is good. And the fact that the earth, the surface of the earth is flat is bad. Ella, rather, they would say emet vasheker. The fact is the surface of the earth is flat, where we are, and the heavens are curved. V'chach bilshonenu omrim al hanachon v'hashav emet vasheker. And even in our own language, we call the correct and the false emet vasheker. Ve'al hanaot v'hamegune. But something that's beautiful or something that's ugly, we use the terms tob vara. Like in Paro's dream, which Joseph interpreted, the initial dream was there were cows, which were tobot mar'eh. They were beautiful to look at, like nice, fat, healthy cows. But then they got eaten up by the parot haraot, who were thin and ugly. So right there, Paro is telling you that it was ugly and beautiful. You don't really know if it was ugly and beautiful. It is with the intelligence that man could know the difference between truth and falsehood.
Excuse me, Hacham, one more thing. I think you might be sharing the wrong page to the screen.
Oh,
from what you're reading.
Can you see this? Let's see.
We can't see your cursor, so I think you might be.
Okay, sorry about that. So let's see now. Let's share screen. Thank you. And this is what I want to share. How about, can you see my cursor now?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, good. Sorry. So this is what I've been reading all this time. Let me just read it quickly. Ki basechel yabdil ben ha'emet ve'hasheker. With the intelligence, you will distinguish between true and false. And this ability, this capacity was extant in him in his completeness and in his completeness. But what's good and ugly, good and bad, or beautiful and ugly, that's with conventionalisms, not with things you know from intelligent analysis. Because we don't say lefisha en omrim hashamayim kadurim tov. We don't say that the heavens are curved, that's good, and that the surface of the earth is flat, is bad. Ella omrim emet vasheker. Rather, we say true and false about those. And even in our common parlance, we call the true and the false, or the correct and the incorrect, emet vasheker. But on the beautiful and the ugly, we say tov vara, just like I said about Paro's dream. Ubasechel, it's with the intelligence, yadaha adam ha'emet min hasheker. God, a man would know the true from the false. It's the similar with all the products of rational analysis. We would call scientific analysis or logical analysis. That's how man thought before he got involved with the snake and the eshadat. Okay, because he was in this state of pretty much human perfection at the time of creation, then there's a pasuk in Tehillim, in Psalms, that says, "Vatehaserehu me'at melohim." God, or the psalmist, King David, refers to early man as, and you made him slightly less than Elohim. Now, what do you think Elohim means in this context? It's not princes, and it's not God, it's angels. Let me see if I can find oh yeah, here it is in my slides. Okay. We go over here. So Elohim means angels here. This is Psalm 8, Tehillim Perek Het, Vatehasserehu me'at melohim vechabod vehadar te'aterehu. So this opens up, Ma enosh ki tizkerenu. What is man that you should remember him? Ben Adam, and a Ben Adam that you should remember him. It's a synonym. And God made him a little bit less originally than angels. And he surrounded him with kavod, with honor, vehadar, with glory. He enveloped him. So that's how early man was. And now I'm back here. So in the Tehillim, Maimonides is quoting that pasuk. Because of his original perfection in Tehillim, early man, is referred to as being slightly less than angels. Lo haya lo choach shemit'asek b'mefursamot kelal v'lo hisiran. He didn't have the ability to get involved with conventionalisms because they're imaginary. He didn't even perceive them. How do we know that? Because the most ugly things a human can do is to walk around naked. That is to uncover your private areas. This wasn't nothing wrong with that. And he didn't even perceive that there could be anything wrong with that. So you see that being naked or being shamed about being naked, we all have it, but it's the first conventionalism. And it didn't exist until after Adam and Eve entered the world of conventionalisms, which are not generated from sechel, not generated from intelligence, but from imagination. Whoops, there we go. Asher hata, and after he sinned, v'nata achare te'avotav hadimyoniyot, and after he, nata means to lean towards his imaginary desires, v'ta'anugot, and pleasures, v'ta'anugot hushav hagufanim, and the pleasures of his bodily senses. So there's a little switch. With this switch in epistemology, with this switch in how man thought, and switching from the world of emet v'sheker, true and false, to bodily pleasures, and which may not be there, but they seem to be there. That's ta'avotav hadimyoniot. Like the pasuk says, what did Eve say exactly when she was looking at the Es Hadat? She said something strange. Kitob ha'es lema'achal. This tree is good for eating. How does she know that? She's just looking at it. V'chi ta'avahu la'ainayim. And because this tree is very desirable to the eyes. Maybe she thought it was pretty or majestic in some way. What is the connection between a beautiful tree and one that is good to eat? Sometimes things that are good to eat are ugly, like eggplant, let's say. And sometimes things that are bad to eat are beautiful. There are poisonous trees which look wonderful. Na'inash, shenishlela mimenu otaha hasaga hasichlit. Once they started perceiving their reality in this way, that's the punishment. It's not that the punishment was external, like you rob a liquor store and we throw you in jail. No, it's you just make a choice to change your mental apparatus, and your punishment is that you're limited by that self-imposed mental apparatus, and you can no longer perceive emet v'sheker. Now all you perceive is whether the things are tov and ra. Ulfichach himra et hasevui asher mehamat sichlo nistaveh bo, and therefore he rebelled against the commandment which because of his very intelligence he was commanded in, v'niknit lo hasagat hamefursamot, and he only acquired in place of the sechel, he acquired the ability to perceive conventionalisms, v'shaka behabhanat ra behatov, and he was enmeshed, almost drowning. Shaka is the same word we use for sheki'at hahamad, sunset, like the sun just kind of falls below the horizon and it looks like it's just drowning in the darkness. That's what his life became. And all he could understand was ugly and beautiful, good and bad, whatever that means, and there's no rational basis for it. Ve'az yada erech ma shehifsiv u'ma shenit'artal mimenu u'be'ez masav hu nimsa. Now you notice the Torah never shows you when he was first created that he recognized what it was like to be the opposite. Only when he chose the opposite, to leave the intelligence and to enter the realm of Tov Vara, did he realize what the prior state was like. So then That's what the pasuk says. And if you eat it, means if you make this choice, obviously, as everybody knows now from this chapter, that's a metaphor. There's no tree and there's nothing to eat. It's a choice of how your mind is going to operate. Do you want to imitate the Elohim and you'll know Tov Vara? Yes, you could have power and you could be the people in society who get to say what's hot and what's not, but in return you give up your original completion as a human, which is to know, which is to have intelligence, full intelligence. V'lo ya'amar, but the snake never said, Yodai sheker va'emet. Never said, you will be able to know falsehood and from truth. Or masireh sheker ve'emet. Or you will be able to perceive sheker ve'emet, falsehood and truth. Ve'en bidvarim ha'hechrechiyim tov v'vara kilal, ela sheker ve'emet. So this Hebrew word hechrechiyim means necessary. The Arabic is daruri. Fi daruri tob vara. There is no. So what is a shi daruri? A thing that is necessary. That's a word in Arabic or Judeo-Arabic you use for intuitive or natural. So when it's true that a flower throughout the day orients its petals towards the sun. So that as the sun moves from east to west, the flower's petals track across the sky, the sun's trajectory, and they move from east to west. The flower has no choice in it. It's necessary. That's what we mean here in the Arabic, daruri. It's necessary. Or when a dog has to urinate, he just goes outside and he pees. There's no thought about it. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's something you naturally do. So in natural things, there's no tov vara at all. The fact that a virus passes through direct contact with another human over, let's say, a half an hour, where you share minuscule drops of mouth moisture or nose moisture, that's not good or bad. That just is. Ella sheker ve'emet. V'hit bonen omro. So now I want you to understand. Maimonides is saying, I want you to understand the following pasuk. There's a pasuk that says, "Vatipakachna arene shenehem vayede'u ki arumimhem." And let me now new share for that, which is, oh no, it's already here. It's in my slides. That's right. And here we go. Here it is. So here's the part of Bereshit that we're talking about. It's chapter 3. So now, after they ate it, vatochal, the woman ate it, vatiten gam leisha, and she gave from the fruit of this tree also to her husband, ima vayochal, and they ate it. Vatipakachna arne shenehem. What does that mean? Vatipakachna arne shenehem, vayede'u, and they knew ki ayrumimhem, that they were naked. So therefore, they were shamed that they were naked, so they had to do something. Vayitperu ale te'ena. So they sewed fig leaves, and they made kind of underwear for themselves. What does vatipakachna mean? So you look in the Targum, v'it pataha arne tarvehon. The eyes of both of them were opened. What does that mean? So Hanamam is going to now explain what that means exactly. We go back to the text. So, V'hit bonen omro, you should understand well his statement, means God's statement. It's in the Chumash. Vatipakachna arne shenehem, their eyes were, I'll tell you in a minute what it means, and they knew that they were naked. V'lo amar vatipakachna arne shenehem vayir'u. It doesn't say that their eyes opened and they saw. Ki et asher ra'a b'tahila hu asher ra'a b'sof. Exactly what they saw in the beginning that's what they saw now. They had the same bodies and there was the same garden and the same trees. But now they look at it from a different point of view. V'lo haya sham arafel neged hareut shenit baher. There was no thick darkness, neged hareut, in front of their eyes or opposing or precluding sight, shenit baher, that became cleared up so that they could now see what was actually there. Ella ne'aset lo tichuna acheret shebahu masir genut Rather, his mind changed. It wasn't the hardware. The hardware is seeing the same exact image and sending it to the same exact brain. But what happened? The software changed. In the mind, before when they saw each other naked, they didn't notice a thing. Now when they saw each other naked, they felt shame. They said, oh, I'm naked. That's bad. That's the first conventionalism. That's the first human notion made up that being naked is bad. And we all feel it. So you see how powerful it passed through all of humanity, but it's made up. The sechel doesn't see nakedness. Only the imagination sees something bad about nakedness. To the sechel mind, the original human mind, it just is. Well, yeah, you're naked. There's your anatomy. To the imagination-based mind who ate from the es hadat, there's something wrong. That's the first conventionalism. In a moment, I'll tell you the second one. Veda ki hamilah hazo, and you should know that this word, kilomar, ya'ani, says here, if you know Arabic a little bit, ani, kilomar, we say in Spanish, quiere decir, it means to say. Pakach, enan ne'emeret beshum panim, the shoresh in Hebrew, pe, kof, het, is never applied in any instance, ki im al inyan pekihad ra'ayon, lo al hadush hush hareut. It's always about a mental change where you have a different point of view, never about a sensory change where you could see now what you could not see before. How do we know that? So you all know the story, I hope, but I'll tell you in short, about Hagar. Hagar had a son named Ishmael. Sarah did not like Hagar, and she asked Abraham to get rid of Hagar and her son. And in Spanish, it would say, échela y su hijo. Get rid of her and her son. I don't want her here in my house. So she goes, and she's ready to commit, just to die, and she throws Ishmael under a tree, and she's ready to let him starve to death. And then God shows her a well. But the well was already always there, because it says, Vayifkach Elohim et aineha. God opened her eyes to see what was already there. It means the image was there and available to her. She just chose, because she was in this melancholy state, she was in this almost suicidal state, she chose not to see it. So God kind of gave her a little nudge, and she saw it. And there's another pasuk that says, Az tipakachna arne arvrim, which is from Yeshaya, but we won't go to it. Pakoach oznaim v'lo yishma. His ears are open, but he won't hear. Ke'en omro asher aynayim lahem lirot v'lo ra'u. So you can choose not to see what is right in front of you. And now I want to go back to my slides for a moment. Okay. Aha. So I told you the first conventionalism is that it's bad to be naked, and we still have that. What's the second? So here it is. In the next chapter, right after that, right at the end of that chapter, chapter 3, it's Gimal Kaf, verse 20, where right after the narrative, God speaks closing words to Adam and Eve and says, you're going to have to work the land now, and you're going to sweat. You're going to have to sweat. B'ze'at apecha tochal lachem. You're going to have to like plow the dirt and to plant weed and eat. It's not going to be easy like it was before. Then Adam says something strange. Vayikra ha'adam shem ishto Hava. Adam calls his wife Hava, which means life giver. Ki hi hayeta em kol hai, because she was the mother of all living beings. Well, now wait a minute. Who are we talking about? At the moment, Adam and Eve had no children. So it wasn't her children. So who's kol hai? Every living being? So what do you mean she's the mother of every living being? He's seeing her in a way that is not true. It's not emet, but in his kind of putting her on a pedestal, in a sense, he makes a goddess out of her. So let me quote you something from a famous Jewish psychologist. I'll tell you about him in a moment. His name is Erich Neumann. And he founded the Israeli Institute of Jungian Psychology, as it happens. He was a student of Carl Gustav Jung. Here's what he says. The psychological development of humankind begins with the matriarchal stage in which the archetype of the great mother dominates and the unconscious directs the psychic process of the individual and the group. He wrote a book about this called The Great Mother. If you've ever heard anything about Carl Jung, they have what you might call leitmotifs or patterns that all human societies have. He identifies something called the collective unconscious, that everybody every member, every individual in a society shares at the unconscious levels, not even brought out to their awareness most of the time. These archetypes, these show up in dream images. Well, one of the first ones is called the Great Mother. In Greek, it's called Magna Mater. We know it as Mother Nature. Have you ever seen one of those depictions where there's a woman who's kind of like middle-aged and she has long flowing like white dress, like a Greek kind of toga, and she's kind of like all-knowing. They depicted that in commercials and advertising in the 70s and the 80s. That's the Mother Nature. And if you personify Mother Nature as this kind of woman, you're thinking in the archetype called the Great Mother. Who invented this archetype? Adam, when he called Hava Em Kol Hai. The original title of the book, for anybody interested, is Die große Mutter, der Archetyp des großen Weiblichen, which means that's feminine. So that's the archetype of the great feminine. So that's the second conventionalism. And many more conventionalisms started rolling out of Adam and Eve's mind after this event, when they left the Garden of Eden, because once they left the Garden of Eden, they are no longer in the realm of Emet Vasheker, as we just explained, but they're in the realm of Tob and Ra. So now I'm going to go back to the text. Let's see what he says next. Aval omro al Adam. Oh, before we do that, sorry, I want to go back to something else. Let's do this. Go back to my slides. Okay. Now, we have to close a loop here. So the snake appeals to Adam and Eve with a sales pitch. And he says, well, you know, God really didn't want you to eat from that tree because he didn't want competition. Because the day that you eat from the Es Hadat Tov V'Ra, v'yitem kelohim yodei Tov V'Ra. We now know what Elohim means. Of the 3 or 4 possible meanings in Hebrew, this one means princes. Okay. Who are the princes? Now, how many people were on earth at the time that we know about? Well, Adam, Eve, and in the life which I'm focusing on now, the life of Cain, who Adam and Eve had 2 sons, Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Everybody's heard of them, right? Okay. And Cain kills Abel. So now there's only 3 people in the entirety of existence, Adam, Eve, and Cain. And God has a little speech or an interaction with Cain, Vayomer lo Adonai, Lachen kol horech Cain, shiv'atayim yukam. Now Cain was paranoid, or he was afraid that somebody will kill him, perhaps because he killed his brother. And if the story gets out, they might kill him. So God says, whoever kills Cain will be avenged 7-fold. Shiv'atayim yukam. Yukam is the word nekama. There's really a nun missing there. Yunkam, but we say yukam, dagesh nakof, because of the missing nun. He will be avenged 7-fold. Vayasem Adonai leKain ot. So God made for Cain a symbol, some kind of physical index that anybody could see, so that nobody who found him would kill him. Who's the somebody? Who are we worried about? We got Adam, we got Eve, who know Cain personally, and we've got Cain. So who's left? Even if Cain has a wife, so it's his wife. So we've got 4 people on earth. Who we're talking about? Now, Vayeseh Cain milifnei Adonai. So after this interaction, Cain goes, Vayeshe be'eres nod kivmat arden, and he goes and dwells in the land of Nod. Nod means wandering place. Like Vanad, Nod is wandering place. Kizmat Aiden, which is to the east of where he was before, the east of the Garden of Eden. Here's another clue. So Cain knows his wife, and knows in the biblical sense, and she becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son named Hanoch. Now, Vahi Boneh, and Cain built a city, Vayikra Shem Ha'ir, and he called the name of the city Keshem Beno Hanoch. So he called it Hanoch Town or Hanochville, something like that. Hanoch Landing. So who's going to live in the city? We got Adam, Eve, the dead and no family there of Abel, Hevel. We've got Cain, his wife, and Hanoch. So I count 5 people. So first of all, who is he afraid of before he does this? And second of all, who do you imagine? Why are you building a city? Who's going to live there? And moreover, this further exacerbates my question, who are the princes that the snake is referring to? How did Adam and Eve ever hear of princes? So there was a Sephardic Haham, although he was a converso. I call him a Haham because he was very intelligent and he had Jewish ideas. And you're going to be surprised what he's the inventor of. Has anybody ever heard of La Otra Venida, which is in Spanish, means the second coming? This man invented the second coming. His name was Ishaq de la Pereire. But that's a francization, I guess you would call it, a casting into French of a Portuguese name, which is Pereira. Now, you may not know this, but all the conversos from Portugal name themselves after fruit trees. So you have Pereira, which is this name, a pear tree. You have Pinheiro, which is a pine tree, because pine trees have the pine nuts. And there's other Oliveira, olive tree. They always name themselves after trees. I think they were trying to say Ais Hayim, a living tree or a tree that gives life, something like that, but I don't know. So this Ishaq de la Pereire, really his name is Pereira, was a converso. And he invented the following theory. He said, you always ask us when the conversion of the Jews will happen. Well, I'll tell you. If Jesus comes a second time, he's going to have to come in Israel because that's where he was the first time. And it has to be in Israel under Jewish sovereignty like it was the first time. It has to be a Jewish society. And if Jesus comes a second time in Israel, when the land of Israel is settled by Jewish people and there are hundreds of thousands of Jews living there, and Jesus actually comes, yes, of course, we'll accept him. You bet, no problem. But in order to get there, we need to set the stage. And in order to set the stage, we need the Jews to have an independent, sovereign nation in Israel. So if you guys will help us with that, I'm sure everything will come out just the way you want. So obviously he was a shrewd individual. And even though he was outwardly Catholic, this is a converso mind. So he wrote a book called, and he wrote it in 2 languages, and it was published simultaneously in both, one in Latin and one in English. It was printed in the year 1655, 1656. What I'm reading to you now is the card catalog, I believe, from Yale, where they have a copy of the book in English. It's called Pre-Adamitae, P-R-E-A-D-A-M-I-T-A-E, which is the Latin plural for men before Adam. And he, because he was a converso, of course, he ties his discourse to certain Pisukim in the New Testament, the 5th chapter of the Epistle of Paul to the Romans. That's the letter you know of as Romans, if you know the New Testament. And here's the actual cover page printed in London in 1656, and that by which are proved that the first men were created before Adam. I think the Torah agrees. I think he got this idea from the Torah. I think he got it from Jewish tradition. It's a Jewish tradition we don't hear about too much these days, but it's clear to me from the snake talking about Elohim, Cain worried about somebody outside the Ben Adam family, means Adam, Eve, Cain and his wife, etc., killing him. And then he builds a city. So I think there was a pre-Adamic society. You could call it Cro-Magnons, you could call it Neanderthals, you could call it any of the names that scientists have come up to describe men or humanoids who walked the earth and were similar to Homo sapiens, but who weren't. And I think they were around. And as we know, the Neanderthals inbred with the Homo sapiens to some extent. And most people on the planet today do have some Neanderthal DNA. I think it's more common in Southeast Asia, like the Aborigines have more of it than Europeans or Semites. And I think that's who Cain was building a city for. He kind of went back to the pre-Adamic society. And that's where the princes came from. So now we can go back to, I think that's good. We'll go back to the text and finish that. So now, about Omro al-Adam, now there's a pasuk in Eyob that says, Mishaneh fanav v'teshalehehu, that man changed his face. Se cambió sus faces. In Ladino, the word for face is plural, just like it is in Hebrew. Panav, panim is plural. In English, it's face. But some of you may remember, and it's about another 2.5 months we'll be doing it, is the Selihot. So there's this, one of the famous parts of the Selihot is the Imafes. And in Seattle, we always sang it in Ladino or Espanol. And it starts out, Faces a él conocerás. And it's translating the word panim. It was written by a German rabbi from Regensburg, Yaakov of Regensburg. And the Sephardim in Christian Spain liked it, so they translated it into Spanish, and that's the famous Imafes. And it begins faces, which translates the word panim. So, Mishaneh fanav v'teshalehehu. Adam changed his face, and you sent him out. Hare be'uro ufirusho. Here is what the meaning and explanation of that pasuk is. Ka'asher shana piniyato gurash. Let me just take a minute to show you where that is. So this is the book of Job. Job is a fantastic book. It's not studied enough. Unfortunately, people only studied it, it seems, in the last few hundred years on Tisha B'Av. We have Ladino translations of it, which we used to read. But people tend not to study it a lot. Maimonides loved the book of Job. He has 3 or 4 chapters of the Guide of the Perplexed that we're reading now, devoted to Eyob and what it means and what its history is. Here's chapter 14 of Eyob. I just give you the first and the 20th Pesukim. Adam Yilud Isha, man who was born of woman, Kesar Yamim Muspa Roges. His days are short and full of anger, means full of stress. Like they're satiated with stress. And then he has a whole narrative about the creation of man. And then he says, Tit kefeu lanesach v'yahaloch. You, speaking to God now, you always like pushed against him, lanesach forever, v'yahaloch, and he went away. Mishaneh fanav, he changed his face, v'teshalehehu, and you exiled him. Now I got to tell you, Maimonides is translating it correctly, but most of the people who translate the Bible say that God changed his face. Absolutely not. That's because he still had the Selim Elohim. So he made a choice. There was a choice to eat from the Es Hadat Tobavara, Mishaneh Fanav. He changed his trajectory, his destination, and as a result of that, you had to expel him. Okay, back to Maimonides. About Omro al-Adam, but his statement, God's statement in the book of Eyob about man, Mishaneh fanav v'teshalehehu, he changed his face and you exiled him. Hare be'uro firusho. This is its explanation and it's what it means. Ka'asher shana piniyato gurash. When he changed where he was going, he was exiled. Kifanim shem nigzar min fana, because the noun face is a noun that comes from the verb to turn towards. Lefi she'ha'adam b'fanav hu poneh ledavar harasui lo. Because a man turns his face to whatever he wants, to whatever he's after. Amar ki ka'asher shana fniyato, when he changed where he was going, ufana kelapeha davar asher kevar kidem elav hasivui shelo yifne elav, and when he turned his face, he turned his entire life's direction to the very thing that God had warned him, don't go there. Don't go there in a mental sense, in an epistemological sense, in a cultural sense. And he did. Gurash Gan Eden. He was exiled from Gan Eden. V'zehu ha'onesh shehu keneged ahet middah keneged middah. We're going to go into this next time in some detail, but I want you to understand this punishment is not an external sentence that the heavenly court imposed on Adam. He created the punishment himself by changing his mind. Because he changed his mind, he could no longer live as he was intended to. God didn't have much to do with it. If you have free choice and you have a Selim Elohim and you choose to enter the world only of Tov and Ra, that precludes your options that you once had. That limits yourself. It's like desiring to enter into the matrix. It's like somebody who was created outside the matrix. I hope you saw the movie. Who's aware that people are in the matrix and who decides that he's going to enter the matrix, but because he comes from the outside, he'll have a leg up and he can kind of be the boss in the matrix. But it's the matrix. It's not real. You're the boss of people who are deluded in a delusion you helped create. Lefi shehutar lo le'echol min, let's see, what is it? Missing. Oh, lefi, because originally hutar lo le'echol min he'arev. He was permitted to eat from anything pleasant. Wilhit aneg ben nahad ubshalva, and to enjoy himself in rest and in peace. Shalva is another synonym of rest. But when he became someone who chased after imaginary desires, and after his just bodily pleasure and imaginary pleasure, like we said before, and he ate from that which he was warned not to eat. He was precluded from eating any of that which was available to him before. These are all metaphors, of course, for what you could do with your mind. There's no trees really there. There was food, but this story is not talking about the food that was available to Adam in Gan Eden. It's talking about the mental state, or we would say epistemologies that were available to him. Therefore, now we're talking literal food. Therefore, he was required or obligated to eat the worst of all possible foods, which he never even ate before and never nourished himself from that. And only after a lot of effort, and labor, you're trying to grow wheat and weeds and briars, bushes and thorny bushes are going to grow there, and you're going to have to, by the sweat of your brow, eat the food. And he was therefore comparable to the animals, bimzonotav, in what he ate, verob masavav, in most of his status, means how he conducted his life. Kemoshe amar ve'achalta et aiseb hasadeh, and you will eat the grass of the fields. Ve'amar miba'er leparasha zo, and there's another chapter in Tehillim directed to this, which we recite at funerals. Adam bikar bal yalin, nimshal ka behemot nimu. This is important. Adam, man, bikar, in yakar. And you know this word yakar from the Megillat Esther, in glory, in honor. Yakar is like the Hebrew word for valuable. Bal yalin. He decided not to dwell in the yakar, in the very valuable. Nimshal ka behemot nimu. So then he became comparable to the animals. Ishtabah bal harason. May he who has the ultimate will, referring to God, be praised. Asher lo tusach tachlito v'chochmato. Whom his wisdom and the tachlit, the ultimate of his existence can never be perceived. It's a kind of a play on words. I'll explain it more next time. So that's the end of the chapter. If there's any questions, is there a way I can answer questions?
Yeah, Rabbi, I think there are a few questions in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay, let me look at the chat then. Get up there. No. Okay. More chat. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Oh yeah. I should have done this before. Sorry about that. Let's see. You're showing. Okay. Very good. Angels. Very good. We're saying that Elohim and Selim Elohim is different than the one in Kelohim Yod Archetypal Vara. Absolutely. David Chasky. Good question. Absolutely. This whole chapter is a play on what the word Elohim, the different meanings of Elohim. So yes, Elohim in Yod Archetypal Vara is princes. Selim Elohim, Elohim there is God. That's right, correct. Okay, good. If the leaders, judges, rulers, and the Elohim would differentiate good and bad, how is it that different than the beracha given to humans to rule over all beings, or the Mizmor recorded that after saying that man is just less than angels, it say it was made to rule over creation. Well, the angels, in a sense, rule over us, depending on how you define angels. The physical reality that we have, if we want to make a rocket and go to Mars, you need to overcome gravity, you need to reach a terminal velocity. Those are malachim. I mean, God created a structure, and gravity is one of the malachim, let's say. So they rule over us now. It was in that sense. It wasn't rule over in an arbitrary way to further your own pleasure or to have this sense of power. Okay, let's see. The Pasuk from Yeshab. Okay, fine, that's good. Well, so the evangelical support of Israel. Yes, you can. That was Ishaq de la Pereire invented the 55 million people who now support the state of Israel, the evangelicals in the United States. Perhaps they are Israel's biggest political friends on earth, the opposite of the Europeans who really don't want to see Israel be a strong state. And you can thank one and only Ishaq de la Pereire. How do we know the snake was not referring to angels and God wasn't referring to the people of the future? Could the city Cain build just mean he established himself? Well, Elohim are the ones who Yod Archetypal Vara. That's the whole opposition here. There's an opposition between Elohim, Yod Archetypal Vara, and Elohim to be slightly less than Elohim, right? And I'll go into it next week to follow up, but when Harambam describes the 10 levels of angels, the lowest one is called Ishim because they're the most similar to man. So there was man has a potential to be very, very intelligent, almost like an angel, but for that you have to undo the problem of eating from the Es HaDa'at Tov Vara. Es HaHayim, good question, I'll explain it next time. Does the Harambam believe it is possible to get back to this mindset? Yes. That's the function of the Torah, absolutely. But you have to observe the Torah is intended, not as dictated to you by modern Jewish Elohim, el que entiende, entienda. Do Adam and Eve act as archetypal characters? That's a deep thing. I'll get to that next time. Where was pre-Adamic man then in relation to Adam and Hava? Pre-Adamic man had their own societies, and I think Adam and Eve were a quantum leap forward, and they lived separately. They were designed not to be insulated somewhat from them like they're insulated from the rest of the animals. By the way, this whole story we're reading happened on the 6th day. This was before God finished all the creation. This is before Vaychulu Hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol seba'am. So this is part of the creative process of man and mankind that we know today. Was the act of Adam eating from the Es HaDa'at in itself an act of Ra? No, it was an act of Sheker, because you're denying your own capabilities and limiting your options and precluding your development based on an illusion. But we'll get there next time. So I think that's it, Ethan. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Nochala buena. Betob Talinu. I'm really enjoying myself. I hope you are too. Next time I'll make sure to look at the chat questions earlier, and I will wrap up any question I didn't address now in next class, where we wrap up all the loose ends and we'll read some of Hacham Fa'ur and some other interesting things. And,
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Zaku Baruch. Thank you all.
Buenas todos. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.